This is episode 150. And if you are a brand new podcaster, you like to listen to certain types of content, whether it's on YouTube or audio, however you do it. And because you have your favorites, you will tend to create your content similar to the way they create their content. And I'm going to tell you why that's not a good idea.
Sound matters. Be heard. Welcome to the podcast where you get exclusive behind-the-scenes tips to make your own show sound truly spectacular. This is Potastic Audio.
Hey, what's happening? How are you doing today? Thank you so much for being here. I am Chris, and I started podcasting back in the summer of 2019, not knowing nothing about nothing when it came to podcasting. I thought podcasting was just like regular radio, and therefore I created my show kind of based around the radio shows I listened to. I just assumed that's how you did it. But podcasting really is quite different than standard terrestrial radio. So to do a podcast that really mimics regular radio isn't really the right way to do things. And I learned that out the hard way. So the best thing to do is to learn from your mistakes, but the smarter thing to do is to learn from somebody else's mistakes. Let me make those mistakes for you so you don't have to. So the other day I was kind of thinking, like, why am I drawn to the audio format? Like, why do I love audio podcasting more than I love like the video chat, Zoom chat style of like a YouTube video show? I guess quotation marks, let's call it a podcast, but really it's just a YouTube video conversation. It's a recorded Zoom call basically on YouTube. Hey, you can podcast however you want. You can call it a podcast if you really want to. Technically, it's not. But hey, you be you, you do you. Myself personally, I have listened to more radio and more radio shows and more podcast audio shows than anything else, than any other form of content. I've always been on the road, driving for work or driving to get to work or traveling and things of that sort. So I've never had your typical quote unquote like desk job. I've never had an office job where I sat at a computer. And if you do sit at a computer, chances are you're not just watching YouTube all day long. Are you? Maybe you are. I don't know. But I'm saying is that my whole entire experience with any of this content creation at all, for the most part, has been in an audio format. And because it's been in an audio format, that was the style of content that I created because that is what I was used to. You will tend to see this trend happen across many different podcasts. If the person doing the podcast comes from the corporate space and they're used to going to these conventions with the whole convention jargon, the presenter jargon that happens on a stage at a typical conference meeting, then their podcast will sound pretty much like that because it's what they're used to. Basically, what I'm saying is we are all products of our environment. Whatever environment we are in day in, day out is more than likely going to be the style of the podcast, or even if it's a YouTube channel, the style of the thing that you physically create. If you grew up in a house that only listened to country music, and you lived out in the middle of nowhere, America, and all you listened to was country, your parents listened to country, your friends listened to country, you all had pickup trucks, you all went camping and shooting guns on the weekends or whatever you guys do, there's a good chance that you will probably also like country music. Here's another scenario. Let's just say as a kid, you like collecting and reading comic books. You collected all the comic books, you traded with comic books, you saw the comic book cartoons when they came out earlier. So when Marvel Studios came around, they decided to make these Marvel movies. Guess what? There's probably a good chance you went and saw them. And there's also a pretty good chance you love them. Now that my kids are a little older, they both have iPhones and that sort of thing. So they watch a ton of YouTube or maybe TikTok, but mostly YouTube type stuff. When I was their age, YouTube wasn't even a thing. But when it did come out, I was all about it. Let me tell you, I had my own YouTube channel. I was making goofy videos because back in the early days of YouTube, that's all it really was like quick, short, goofy videos. And because that's what my kids like to watch, guess what? When they decided to create some kind of content, it was a video content on YouTube, whether it's YouTube Shorts or longer video. But yeah, YouTube was the thing they created because that is the world they are used to. It's the thing they enjoy to consume. And because they consume that thing, they know that thing. So they're very comfortable creating that thing. But as content creators, whether it's a YouTube channel or an audio podcast like this one, it is very difficult to try to make something that's completely unique, something completely original, something that is truly ours, that does not sound like or mimic somebody else's, because you obviously got into this thing because of somebody else and something you saw them doing. You're like, hey, I see them doing that. I see them making a podcast or a YouTube channel or a TikTok or whatever it is. You see somebody else's content and you're like, hey, I wonder if I can make something like that for myself. And since you're so new in the game, you don't really know anything. You basically see what they're doing. You see the equipment that they have. And you pretty much say, well, if I just kind of get the same kind of stuff and I kind of do the same thing that they're doing, then maybe I will be just as successful as they are. But if you do that, that can definitely lead to some pitfalls in your podcasting journey. Here are the top 3 mistakes that podcasters make when they try to copy somebody else. So mistake number 1 is obviously you have a lack of authenticity. One of the biggest mistakes is trying to be someone you're not. Listeners can often tell whether a podcaster is being disingenuous or not true to themselves. Instead of copying someone else's style or personality, you should probably focus on discovering your own unique voice and perspective. Be genuine, share your own experiences, and let your personality shine through. There's one thing that'll make your show truly unique about you, and that is you. You have a background in something. You have a story that's different than my story, and it's different than anybody else's story. Stories and unique experiences is what's going to set your podcast apart. Okay, moving on to the second mistake that podcasters make if they try to copy somebody else, and that is, you're ignoring audience preferences. You see, every single audience is different. So what works for one content creator may just not work for you or somebody else. It's important to understand your target audience and what they respond to. Rather than blindly copying another podcaster's format or content, take the time to engage with your audience. Yeah, this is a good time to actually ask for some feedback. And once you have that feedback, you can tailor your content to meet their interests and what they want to listen to. Don't forget who the podcast is truly for. It's for your audience. Hey, if you have to, what you could do is you might involve experimenting with different formats, maybe some different topics or styles until you find what resonates best with you and your audience. And the third mistake that podcasters make when they try to copy another show they admire is that, they're neglecting quality and originality. While it's natural to draw inspiration from other creators, simply copying their content can lead to a lack of originality and quality. Instead of replicating someone else's ideas, focus on creating unique and valuable content that sets your show apart from everybody else. Put your own spin on topics, bring in your expertise and perspective, and strive to offer something new and fresh to your audience. If they've heard it once, they've heard it a million times, but you can do things a little different than everybody else is doing. Practice, practice, practice. Maybe you should invest more time in honing in on your craft. Improving your production quality. Maybe you get a better microphone. Maybe you get some better software. Maybe you actually stop using that Blue Yeti microphone 4 feet away from you because you don't want it in the camera shot. And then maybe, just maybe, you can deliver content that's both engaging and completely original. So those are the 3 common mistakes that podcasters make when they try to literally copy another show that they like or admire. And I get it. I totally understand. I did the exact same thing. There were some radio shows that I liked to listen to. There were some podcasters, like big name podcasters, that I listened to many, many years ago. They're still doing shows today. They're celebrity type shows. You've probably heard of them or heard them. But like I said, as a content consumer, we pretty much just kind of jump into this whole content creation space based on the things we've already seen and watched previously. So we kind of take those tips and ideas and strategies, we take how they do them, and we kind of put it into our own show, whatever show it could be, whether it's a YouTube channel or an audio podcast, doesn't matter. Basically saying is that we like somebody, we kind of mimic the way they do things, and it kind of comes out into our own production. And you can kind of tell when you hear somebody's show that sounds exactly like somebody else's show, like a bigger show, or you see the style that they do things, or even on YouTube, you see this a lot on YouTube a lot. Hey, remember unboxing videos? Is that even still a thing? Unboxing videos. There were so many unboxing videos. When the new iPhone came out, everybody unboxed that and showed all the parts and stuff. Whatever computer they get, they unbox it, show all the cool cables and stuff. There really isn't much to really see when I unbox my MacBook Pro. It's the computer and the cord. That's it. I mean, what else is there? I mean, the box looks cool. I get it. But I remember those big unboxing videos were like all the rage. And I think that everybody started copying everybody else when they did those same things, because once you've seen one, you've seen them all. Because when I buy an iPhone 15, unless it's a different color than your iPhone 15, chances are the parts in the box are going to be the same. So if I make a video exactly like your video, I'm copying you and so on and so forth. That person, I mean, who's to say that person didn't copy the video from somebody else? And it just goes on and on and on. And you've probably seen it in podcasting too. I mean, I know there's a ton of podcasts about podcasting like this one, just like there is a ton of movie review podcasts about movies, Marvel shows, comic books, whatever, you name it. There's got to be multiple shows covering the exact same thing. So what makes their shows unique and different from all the other shows out there? Now, let's just say that maybe, just maybe, your show tends to possibly maybe mimic or copy another content creator's craft or show. Well, what do? How do you fix that? How do you be original? Here are 3 tips that you can put in practice right now to avoid the mistake of like physically copying somebody else. So tip number 1 is basically a simple one, and that is study, don't copy. What do you mean, Chris? I'm studying them. I don't want to copy them, but you're studying them. Yeah, just study them, but don't copy them. Instead of directly copying another content creator, study their work to understand what makes it successful. And I know that sometimes you'll see a big major celebrity with a massive show, with a massive following, and you'll wonder, why is their show so successful? They come on and talk about X, Y, and Z. I come on and talk about the exact same things. But did it ever occur to you that that celebrity is also a celebrity and being a celebrity for many, many years before they even started their podcast. You starting your podcast last week, well, you're pretty much not on par with them. They can talk about whatever they want because they built up to that point. Not saying you can't. I'm just saying they're on third base. You're still trying out for the team, but you can still study them. Identify the elements such as their storytelling techniques, presentation style, or engagement strategies that resonate with you and your audience. Use the good parts that work best for you. Then adapt and integrate these elements into your own unique approach. You see, the goal here is basically to not mimic, but learn from their success and apply it to those lessons in a way that aligns with your own voice and your own content goals. Because your show is completely different, whether you believe it or not, it is completely different than somebody else's show who is doing the exact same content. Okay, moving on to tip number 2, and this is one that we tell you time and time again, and that is you need to know your audience intimately. And I'm not saying like you have to know them naked or anything like that. What I'm saying is that you need to know exactly who your audience is. Like you create a show for who? Who is the person listening to your show? What is their name? What do they like to do? You need to know them inside and out. Take the time to deeply understand your target audience's preferences, interests, and pain points. Engage with them through maybe surveys. That's a good way. Social media interactions. Like I love to interact with you on social media. If you find me on social media, hit me up and I will always respond to anything you say on social media. As long as it's not too negative, like, hey, I can't take the hate, all right? But positive stuff, send your positive love my way. I definitely will write you back and share it and all that great stuff. But what this does is that it actually gathers insights into what they value in your podcast. The best way to know what your listeners want to know about your podcast is to ask them and for them to give you feedback on your own show. You can use this information to tailor your content to meet their needs while staying true to your own voice and personality. By catering to your audience's specific preferences, you'll create content that resonates more deeply and fosters a stronger connection with your listeners. And let me tell you, when you have that deep, strong, personal connection with your audience, it is stronger than watching something on an Instagram reel or watching something on a YouTube short. The audience engagement and the connection with that content is very, very minimal. But there's something about an audio podcast that really connects deeply with the audience. And the third and final tip that you can put in practice right now to make sure your show doesn't sound like anybody else, you're not copying anybody else, is because it's your show, you have to embrace your uniqueness. Whatever is about you is about you. That's where like great storytelling, personal storytelling really comes into play, because the stories that I share about my journey, about my life, the things that I have gone through are going to be completely different about you or anybody else or any other show about podcasting. Our stories are all unique and completely different. You need to recognize and embrace what sets you apart from other content creators. Your unique perspective, experiences, and personality are your greatest assets. Instead of trying to fit into somebody else's mold, celebrate your own individuality and use it to differentiate yourself in the crowded podcasting landscape. Like I said earlier, there's so many different shows out there, but what's going to make your show truly unique and truly special is you. You are the common denominator on every single podcast. Well, how do you do that? Well, obviously, sharing personal stories. And you also can dive into extremely niche topics that you're passionate about. Or maybe if you're kind of funny, not saying you are, not saying you're not, but maybe you can inject some humor and authenticity into your content. By being true to yourself, you'll naturally stand out and attract an audience that appreciates you, your authenticity, and your originality. By following these tips, you can avoid the pitfalls of blindly copying somebody else, copying another content creator, instead of creating a podcast that reflects on your own unique voice. And those are the things that are going to attract the audience, not the massive everybody in the world audience, not the big wide open net, I'm going to catch everybody audience, your own unique audience. There is going to be an audience for you that is attracted to the things you're talking about. It can't merely be content for content's sake. It's got to be more than that. And how do you do that? By injecting your own personality and your own storytelling. The things that you have said and the things that you have gone through are different than anybody else. And that's one thing I thought about the other day when it came to video podcasting versus audio podcasting. I think because now there are so many video shows and video elements, whether it's on short form video or long form video, even video recording, like doing, say, a Zoom chat or even a StreamYard recording or a Squadcast, something of that sort. When you do the interview and you're physically watching the other person and they're watching you and you're talking, I think I noticed this quite a bit, is that as content creators, because of the whole video stuff, we are lacking the ability to tell really good stories and good storytelling. Because if you think about it, most of us all live in a visual world. All of social media is visual. YouTube obviously is visual. There's lots of visual stuff out there. So you just say, hey, look at this thing. Or, hey, check that thing out. Oh, that looks pretty cool. Hey, this car looks like this. Here's this car. Here's this house. Here's this thing. Here's this thing. And you do not have to describe anything because it's on the screen in front of your audience. I think this causes people to lack the ability to tell good stories because they don't have to. But if you are one of those YouTube first content creators before you do the podcast, but you still have a podcast, just remember, people do listen to the show without physically seeing anything. So just be mindful of the audience that actually listens to your show rather than watching it when you create your stuff. And speaking of listening, thank you for listening all the way to the very end of this episode. I do truly appreciate you spending your time with me today. I create these shows directly for you so that you can create an amazing podcast of your very own. And if you got any value today at all, maybe you learned something new, maybe you took these tips and tricks and you put them into practice into your show, and now you have something that's truly original to you, not a copy of somebody else, but it's truly yours. If you got some value from that today, if you could do me just a small favor, head on over to Apple Podcasts, maybe Spotify, or wherever you can leave reviews, and leave me an honest rating and review of this podcast. I would really appreciate it. It tells me you love me doing these things so I can keep making them for you. And until next time, happy podcasting.